Omar Baddar has been very active when it comes to, let's say, arguing for the Palestinian side when it comes to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. At least since October 7, he has been very involved within the online community, and I think he has been one of the most, at least for me, really disgusting people. I mean, it's hard to even put it into words specifically. The way he manages to twist every single concept known to man in the way so it can always be used against Israel and sort of pro the Palestinian people to the point that, well, you'll see on video what I mean exactly. But joining me today, welcome to the reality show. Joining me today is Jonathan and Alex. Hey, guys. And before we go to the video, let me just quickly start because I don't know if you guys have heard about him before. Maybe it's he is a bit more less known figure than I take it for. But Jonathan, have you seen anything from? Have you heard about him before?
I have. I'm proud to say that I have not, and I think this is probably like the third time where I'm introduced, thanks to the Ayn Rand Center UK, to these extraordinary human beings.
Alex, what about you? Have you heard about him before?
No, because, well, I mean, I have obviously, but Omar is just such an intellectual giant that whenever he speaks, I can barely understand it. It's something it just maybe I'm just not on that kind of level.
Well, I don't think he's on sort of Norman Finkelstein's level of intellectuality, if I even can call it that. Which is actually the second time I was thinking about putting Norman Finkelstein as a video we go through, but whenever I do it, I fell asleep, so I never get a chance to actually go through it and decide. So it will be Omar Baddar today. We'll be going through his appearance on Piers Morgan. Again, thank you, Piers, for bringing these people to the spotlight. It's always good. And also thank you for not copyright striking us so we can actually look at them consistently. So just a heads up, this video I think it's a bit over 2 weeks old. It came out, I think, a couple days after the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah. So they will be talking in the first part, they will be mostly talking about that. So we'll cover that. And also it was before the Iranian attack. So just for context, to sort of where exactly it happened. So let's go to the actual video.
With that being at the forefront, I'll say that I think what Israel did in Lebanon and is doing is, don't take my word for it. Listen to what Israeli leaders themselves have said about the assassination of Nasrallah. They said they could have and wanted to reach a diplomatic agreement with Hassan Nasrallah, but his insistence on ending the genocide in Gaza as a precondition to them reaching a diplomatic solution led them to choose to assassinate him and killing hundreds of Lebanese civilians in the process, incinerating entire apartment buildings. So in essence, Israel is choosing to incinerate Lebanese civilians, to assassinate Nasrallah, because they don't want peace in Gaza. That is the dynamic that we have. And the fact that you can look at this and still not figure out what moral policy should be and who's to blame for this kind of path of escalation that we're on, to me is completely mind-boggling. It is obvious that Israel is out of control. It's on a warpath.
All right, look.
So he starts pretty strong. He already, he makes sure to put in the genocide immediately there. Later, he will manage to put all of the trigger words in one sentence very easily. But, I'll just start it off. The fact that, I have no idea where he took what the Israel was saying about the negotiations with Hezbollah, but sort of accepting that it would be okay to basically negotiate with the terrorist organization, with Hezbollah, and the condition of it being that basically Israel should stop defending itself when it comes to actually removing Hamas, and sort of saying like that would be an okay position to be in. I would criticize Israel if they took it, and this was clearly the moral. He'll talk a lot about the sort of the moral decisions a bit later, but this was clearly a moral choice. The world is a better place without Hassan Nasrallah, although he might not think so. Jonathan?
Yeah, he's clearly disturbed by the passing of his hero. It is very, very tragic for him, I'm sure. Well, there are different ways to look at what he's saying. I would say, matter of factly, Israel is too much interested in having peace. Israel has sent so many delegations to, to Qatar, to Egypt, to negotiate peace and a hostage deal. And there's a big movement of Israelis who are very strongly advocating for that. So even if we're just at face value looking at it, there certainly is a lot of movement on Israel's side. I'm not saying that I support that. I'm saying there is. So from that perspective, his commentary doesn't make sense. Now, whereas with Hezbollah, why should even Israel have a negotiation if it has the upper hand? If we are in a good situation, if we have momentum, if we're able to have a historic change in the Middle East and achieve a lasting peace for our own civilians by removing the threat that has targeted them for over a year, why should Israel settle? Why should we compromise? Do you think, God forbid, if the Palestinians had their upper hand after October 7th, do you think they will have asked for peace? They will ask for negotiate? They will go all in. And I don't know why Israel isn't expected to do the same.
Yeah, just quickly on the idea of peace, because I think someone in the chat says Israel does want peace in Gaza. I think the word peace has been sort of like the most floating concept when it comes to this conflict. Like, this side wants peace. Like, what does it really mean? I mean, Israel, in a sense, does want peace. It doesn't want to get attacked. It doesn't want to, live constantly in fear by these terrorist groups constantly attacking it. But if you say that Israel wants peace, and you say, well, why is Israel engaging in war? Well, because they want peace. That's part of it. You can't have peace just sort of like this, it just is, and you achieve it by not defending itself when someone attacks you. But Alex, what do you think about this first thing we've heard from Omar Baddar?
Yeah, I mean, so from a kind of strategic perspective, from what I understand, that Israel really was wanting to negotiate at the very beginning with Hezbollah. When the war kind of started in Gaza, and Hezbollah started firing their rockets, because that they have to. Their raison d'etre is to destroy Israel. So they have to join in. They can't lose face here. They need to also think about their recruitment. They want to get all of the young Shiite boys in Lebanon excited about the prospect of jihad, so they must join in. And from what I understand, Israel really didn't want to get into a conflict with Hezbollah immediately, because they wanted to wait for the Iron Beam to come out, because it really changes the dynamics of the war from a financial perspective. You go from $50,000 per interception to $100 per interception. So they want, from what I understand, Israel really understood the need to eventually have a conflict with Hezbollah, but they were sending delegations, I believe, to try to get them to retreat to the Litani River, so that they could wait to have this conflict with Hezbollah from a financial perspective, to have better, a better defensive posture. And I mean, and who knows, right? Maybe it was just kind of a game that they were just playing along, that they were trying to have negotiations. But yeah, I mean, peace is an entirely it's an obsolete word. It's an obsolete concept, when what you actually mean is, I want you to shut up for a couple of weeks. I want you to stop doing what, I want you to be quiet. And yeah, Omar completely and utterly misses the point. Well, no, he's engaging in evasion. It's very, very clear that that's what he's engaging in. Only a person who's truly committed to evasion and is looking with their eyes literally covered like this could come out with these kinds of assertions and statements. Yeah, he sounds like really a spokesperson for Hezbollah. It's really a shame that they didn't have Omar going and doing some of the negotiations, because he has all of the kind of trimmings of a well kind of put together, polished Westerner using all of the correct, kind of progressive language. But, really he needs to go and put the headband on and, get a Kalashnikov and just really embrace who he is.
Well, you mentioned Hezbollah, so let's actually listen to what he thinks. As I mentioned, this is after what's his name now? It completely fell out. Who was the chief of Hamas? Sorry, Hezbollah.
Nasrallah.
Hassan Nasrallah. And
yeah, Alex.
well, I also did want to mention that Israel did engage in a semi-quasi peace agreement with Lebanon not that long ago, like 18 months ago, where they agreed to give, horrifically, agreed to give our territorial waters for them to look for natural gas. And that was in exchange for them shutting up. And of course, as usual, you cannot negotiate with terrorists. And we had a very, very weak prime minister. We had a caretaker prime minister, Yair Lapid, who just agreed to this territorial water maritime agreement. So there's multiple different violations of existing treaties that Hezbollah, I'm going to call them Lesbala, that Hezbollah have engaged in.
Yeah, again, it's not surprising. Whenever you negotiate with terrorists, whenever you negotiate with evil, they will gain, and you won't win anything. And if someone wants to jump up saying, Lebanon is not Hezbollah, Hezbollah is in the government of Lebanon. Lebanon has clearly stated that attack on Hezbollah is attack on Lebanon. Any differentiation between the two of them is just a technicality. But let's listen to what he said about after Hassan Nasrallah has died or has been killed.
Bond. You also failed to answer my simple question. Are you sorry he's dead?
I look at it in terms of the impact on civilians, which in this case, I think his assassination has made things infinitely more dangerous. We're seeing this onslaught. So yes, this development is not
Omar,
a
that's
positive
not actually
one
an answer to my question. Do you personally feel sorry that he is dead, the head of Hezbollah?
No, look, but that's the thing. I don't have individual personal feelings about players here. For me, what I'm concerned about is ultimately the impact on innocent people. Absolutely. Look, Nasrallah, if you want me to talk about his legacy, that's a really easy thing to do. He was a hero throughout the entire Arab world for having driven Israel out of South Lebanon in 2000, for delivering Israel its first defeat in 2006. And then his record, had a major blemish on it when he intervened in the Syrian civil war for geopolitical reasons on the side of the government. And that upset a lot of Syrians who are essentially repressed and brutalized by the Syrian government to see that he has intervened in order to help them maintain power. But that was more a geopolitical decision more than it is a moral decision. And so he has a mixed record, and a lot of people like him and a lot of people don't. But ultimately, there's no question about the fact that he is a major figure in the region that has a significant fan base, not just within Lebanon, but throughout the entire region. And that taking this major escalatory step, when we've had the alternative, we've had the option of a ceasefire, and Israel chose not to take that and chose the path of escalation, and taking out a major figure is obviously pushing us towards further catastrophe. And it's materializing right now in Lebanon as we're watching Israeli terrorism decimate the civilian population in all parts of Lebanon. And that's a really, really dangerous escalation.
Okay.
So I have no personal feelings about him. He's talking about him like he's pineapple on pizza. Some people like him, some people don't. It's not, what is this sort of like a, well, for one, like absolute, not even having any sort of state, any sort of like stake even in this argument, saying either you don't like him or you do like him, but it's sort of we're just looking at him. he was a hero, and we just again, that's this sort of I call this episode Omar Baddar's Web of Lies, because it's so immaculate the way his sort of arguments are. Saying like he's a hero. Why is he a hero? Why is he considered a hero among the Arab world? It's because he kills Jews. Like you sort of like evade what it actually means. A hero. You don't accept being a hero as like an automatic good thing. You look at, okay, what do you mean when you use that word, and what do people mean when they use that word when it comes to Hassan Nasrallah? Jonathan, what do you think?
I love the Musab's reaction. You can't help but laugh when you hear so much nonsense. This guy.
Yeah, just quickly, I don't think I ever seen Musab Hassan Yusuf laugh or like smile before this interview, because he looks pretty nice when he is doing that. But just
Yeah, he should
random.
smile more. Absolutely, he has a beautiful smile. But look, the only bad thing he has to say about Nasrallah is that he killed some Syrians, a lot of Syrians in the Syrian civil war. That's the only bad thing he did. Other than that, from what I've heard, he's pure. He's essentially a hero. He pushed away the Israelis in 2006. He stood up for the oppressed Shiites in Lebanon. He's basically a saint. Apart from he did some bad stuff in Syria. Like, what about all the Israelis he killed when he bombed Israeli civilians since October 7th, and before that, hundreds of Israelis have lost their lives thanks to this evil person that we are so grateful has passed on. So he wouldn't have anything to say in favor of that. Only when non-Jews are involved, he might have him. And notice that how he said it was a geopolitical, not a moral decision, as if the two things are completely irrelevant. The two terms they have nothing to do with each other. How could you know what's right without morality? Morality is what tells you what's right and what's wrong. And if you make decisions and you want to make the right decision, you need the morality. So the whole supposed independence of geopolitics from morality is, I think, nonsensical.
Yeah, I mean that's sort of like almost like a realpolitik look at geopolitics. Well, they just it's just a geopolitical decision. Well, I didn't know I can use that. I can now justify anything I want. Well, Russia, it's just a special military operation. They feel threatened by NATO. Oh, what Israel is doing? Well, they feel threatened by the Arab nations, so they need to take over Gaza and I mean rest of the Middle East if they want. Like it's a complete cop-out. Like how can you say about like one organization, well, it's just a geopolitical decision, and then like go on Israel and doing a moral outrage or being morally outraged, which I think it's the right thing. Like we should decide these conflicts based on morality and based on who is right, not on some sort of. I mean, that sort of like geopolitical. It's generally good.
On the same point, why can't Israel say, "Oh, it was a geopolitical decision. It doesn't have to do with morality"? How can he condemn Israel for terrorism, where he can't condemn Nasrallah for virtually doing the same thing, be bombing, engaging in war? So why is Israel war is so moral and emotionally packed, morally packed, whereas the war in Syria doesn't have to do with it?
Yeah, just quickly on the geopolitical, like you can use that to sort of explain why something happened, why, for example, why Russia has invaded Ukraine. You can use the sort of geopolitical arguments to explain why it happened, but it doesn't give you any information about the morality of the choice. You have to look at something else. You have to look at philosophy. What is the right thing to do? Not just because a nation does it, it makes it the right thing to do. But Alex, well, what do you think about the geopolitical decision, but also the fact that his view of Nasrallah is basically, well, let's just see what other people think about him.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't. I don't even know. But see, the thing is, Daniel, he's a good guy. He supports Nasrallah. Yeah, sure, why not? But he is a good guy because he supports innocence. That's what he's concerned about. So that negates everything he's saying. That negates all of him. You know, yeah. So what? I love Hitler, but I'm also concerned with innocent people. That makes me a good person, doesn't it? And you know, even onto this term like innocence, right? I mean, true innocence would be welcoming the Israelis. True innocence would be welcoming it because they would say, okay, we are going to be rid of the terrorists who have taken over our country. And you know, I'm thinking even as well, you know, Onkar Ghate wrote a really great article, you know, how to think about innocence in war. And he says, to win this war, we must not let an immoral concern with innocence weaken our resolve. We must have the profound moral conviction that we have the right to exist. We have the right to destroy those who initiate force to deprive us of our rights and our lives. So, you know, that is the moral approach when you're talking about these kind of innocence, you know? And it's also, I find it also a really disgusting, just, I don't know, whitewashing of reality to say, I care so much about the Lebanese people that I want them to live under Hezbollah in a failed state. I love them so much that I want them to exist with that kind of reality. And to you know, I mean, they're basically indigent. I mean, they're it's unbelievable, really, what's going on in Lebanon. I mean, people were robbing banks to get their own money out. I mean, that is what happens when you have complete societal collapse. And Omar has had a complete moral collapse. Complete. I mean, it's all of this kind of, you can just say whatever kind of gobbledygook comes into your mind. You know, yeah, okay, fine. I don't, you know, Nasrallah's okay and Baghdadi's okay because I care about innocence. So I'm a good person, right? That by making that statement, it completely, he wants to think that it completely just kind of whitewashes what he said previously.
Yeah, I think it sort of reveals almost a philosophy of sort of like death worshipping, basically. As long as people don't die, that's pretty much the only standard. If people don't die, we are living good. Basically, that's enough. We don't care about flourishing. We don't care about thriving. We don't care about political freedoms. We don't care about like actually living in free societies where people are able to actually flourish beyond just barely surviving. No, that's not. People are dying, you know, blank out. That's it. No, nothing else we have to think about.
But even just the sort of the way that he's framing history as well. I mean, you know, he's saying that you know, that Lebanon was defeated in 2006, and whilst I completely agree, it was not a strategical win for Israel, and for our standards, which we think about, you know, 1967 or something like that. From our standards, yes, that was a war that we did not win. But to say that Lebanon won the war, I think. How did they win the war? They won the war because they're not completely and utterly occupied by Israel. Is that how you win the war? I mean, the amount of destruction that occurred on their side in the 2006 war, it was immense. To say it was a win, that Nasrallah won that, I think is a little bit ridiculous. And yes, he Omar also does bring up, you know, the very painful, you know, I was a child, but, you know, very painful memory of Ehud Barak deciding to basically, you know, unilaterally retreat for no reason. Well, I'm sure he thought there was a reason. I'm sure he thought he would get some sort of lovely, you know, Nobel Peace Prize, and that after that, Hezbollah, I think it was actually the Americans that said to Ehud Barak, if you retreat back to the blue line, then, you know, Hezbollah are not going to have a territorial dispute with you. And then everything's going to be okay, because that makes sense. Because, you know, Hezbollah are saying they have a territorial dispute with you and they don't like you being there. So if you just give them what they want, then surely that will end the whole thing. Right? There will be, it's kind of like the argument with the two-state solution. They say, oh, if you just, you know, retreat entirely from Judea and Samaria, then the situation with the Palestinians will completely and utterly be resolved. And, you know, forgetting the fact that they are 100% like Nazis, dedicated to the destruction of the Jewish people. It doesn't matter what kind of territory, what kind of square inches of the so-called Shifa farms that you give them. It doesn't. It's also applying Western logic to ideology that is not Western at all, that is mystic in nature. They're the attitude, the anti-Semitic attitude in the Middle East is mystic. It's purely based in superstitious beliefs about Jews, and it's nothing to do with territory. So yeah, so that's a painful thing actually that Omar brought up. But besides that, what can I say?
He's a good guy besides that. But I think
Hey, it's fine.
Yeah, Jonathan, I
Yeah.
think you wanted to jump in.
I just wanted to mention, I very much agree with what you said, Ali. I do want to mention also what he had said about the escalation, which is it's a big point. It's a lie. Israel did not escalate anything in Lebanon. There was nothing. I actually wish they would have escalated on October 7th and also attack Lebanon preemptively. They didn't. It was Nasrallah who decided to escalate, and the escalator is the one who bears the responsibility, and he has to have the burden of the consequences that have unfolded. So from that perspective alone, he is the sole cause of all escalation, and he brought his own death upon him. Israel was not. If I wish Israel was so forward thinking and had just assassinated him at the earliest possible convenience, that would have saved a lot of bloodshed, but that hasn't been the case.
Yeah, the idea of escalation, it's sort of similar to the idea of international law, sort of trying to bring some sort of rules to war. It doesn't work. Once the only escalation happens before the war, when you are sort of like leaning towards a war. Once the war starts, you are in war and you have to do whatever is necessary to finish it. And the way you do it is by de-escalating, as Israel de-escalated many buildings within Lebanon, as well as they de-escalated many of...
Absolutely. And if any of our viewers has watched, and any of you watched the show Fallout, which is a very good show, I think there's a brilliant example that really illustrates that when a group of raiders invade the vault. It's right in the beginning, but then there was a whole debate. There's a big massacre of savages from the outside, and then they have retaken control, but they now put him in custody. And then there's a big debate. What should we do with him? What should we do with these group of savage people that we have in custody? And then they're like, oh, we should educate them. We should teach them our ways.
We can teach them Kant.
We can teach them. Yeah, it's actually in the show. And it's so obvious in the show that you literally can't. They're just crazy savages. They just want to kill people. So you can't. There's no reasoning with them.
Yeah, I mean, just we should go back to Omar Baddar. But yeah, this idea of sort of basically Israel, and I think it is true. Israel does just want to live in peace, but and sort of the Western world wants to live in peace. But that leads them to basically misunderstanding, basically sort of trying to apply the same logic to other people. Basically, well, don't Palestinians also just want to live in a free society in peace? Don't they just want to live in security? But when you have groups like Hezbollah, which again, the only reason why Hezbollah exists is to resist Israel, is to make sure Israel is destroyed. That's not something we are just guessing. That was the reason why they were funded. When you take someone like the Houthis, they have it on their flag. On their flag, they have "Death to Israel," or I think it's like "Death to America," "Curse upon the
to
Jews," I
Jews.
think is.
Yeah.
So again, when you have this, you cannot look at them as they're just like us. They just want to, they just want to control their own nation. They just want to establish a free nation. They just want to basically achieve some sort of prosperity for their own citizens.
Just one last thing as well. I think it's also very important to look at symbols. So if you look at the emblem of Hezbollah, and look at what's on it. You have the machine gun, you have the Quran, you have the machine gun, you have the Quran, and you also have this kind of text from the Quran. Look at the symbol, look at the emblem of the Palestinian Authority, right? You have the Al-Aqsa Mosque and you have the guns. And what is the emblem of Israel? It's the Hanukkah. It's actually the menorah, right? So it perfectly kind of encapsulates the reason they exist.
Did you mean the Palestinian Authority or Fatah specifically? Because I know Fatah has it.
Yeah, so Fatah, yeah, and also the Palestinian Authority. Like if you go to Hebron or whatever and you take a look at like their schools, they have that emblem also on it.
Not particularly creative, aren't they?
Well, just slap an NK if it worked for. I think there's one other nation. I think it's Mozambique that they have AK on their flag. Thank you.
Zimbabwe.
Oh, could be. Thank you, Jonathan, for a super chat. He says in honor of Dr. Leonard Peikoff's 91st birthday. Yes. It's Leonard Peikoff today. So we will celebrate it by continuing watching Omar Baddar. That's not a good segue, but let's hear a bit more from him. So now we're gonna jump about half an hour of the video because they had expert in the middle talking about something different, but let's listen to more.
It was Mozambique, not Zimbabwe. I'm sorry, I always get them mixed.
Oh yeah, I think that I said Mozambique. Okay.
You're hearing Musab here talking about how occupation is all fake and made up and it's whatever, but it's incredible that when you look at what international law says, what the UN says, what the UN General Assembly says, what UN resolutions say in the Security Council, there is a complete and total consensus on the fact that Israel is an occupying power, illegally occupying the West Bank and Gaza and East Jerusalem. The International Court of Justice has come out with an opinion making clear that this occupation is illegal and has to end. So while Musab wants to pretend that this is something that Palestinians manufactured because he has nothing of substance really to say, the reality is just so obvious and so blatant that you don't even know how to address such a bizarre and ridiculous argument that this is something that Palestinians invented. Palestinians have been there for literally thousands of years. They are the natural continuation of people who have lived in that land for a very, very long time. And yes, it's true, Palestine was never an independent UN member, for example, as an independent country. But by the same token, Native Americans in the United States were never also did not have a state that is a member of the United Nations. It doesn't change the fact that they were living on their own land and that colonists came and take over and drove them off of that land and created a new state on top of them. So Israel was created at the expense of Palestinians. And while you might talk about this militant group or that militant group or what their charter may say about the destruction of Israel, in the case of Israel, it is active policy that we're watching is to destroy Palestine. This isn't theoretical. We're not talking about what their charter says. We're talking about what Israel's doing. And Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. It is building illegal settlements in the West Bank, using unspeakable levels of violence against the Palestinian civilians there, and confining them to smaller and smaller areas. We are watching the destruction of Palestine before our eyes in a way that the entire international human rights community and international law says is completely illegitimate and criminal. And our reaction is to fund it and maybe occasionally criticize it instead of standing up to it in a really meaningful sense.
So he really started with basically arguing for the UN. The UN General Assembly has decided that this is an illegal occupation. Every international body agrees with that. And again, it's the same tactic, sort of like saying these things without really, okay, what does it actually mean? What does it mean for the UN General Assembly to say something? Well, what it means is a bunch of mostly authoritarian nations, mostly dictatorships that don't have any respect for the individual rights of their own citizens, has decided that something a free nation is doing is wrong. Why should I care about what these nations think? Why should I have any respect for any of this? And yet, the problem is the fact that the UN exists and the fact that the good nations, even nations like Israel, are basically submitting or giving their sanction to the organization. Israel, by staying in the UN, is basically saying that these decisions have any sort of authority, which they don't. Jonathan?
It's where do we start? Where do we even start with all that? The UN, well, the UN, I would like to invite the UN and Omar to come to Tel Aviv and enforce their laws here. I would like to invite them all to challenge Israel and come to enforce all these laws that they came up with. I can also come up with all sorts of laws. It doesn't mean anything if I can't enforce them. What does it mean that there's a law you can't? I don't know. You give me something stupid, Dan. What would be a stupid law to come up with?
Well, my favorite example is sort of like when you are in the restaurant, you give like negative tips, so they have to give you money. It's
Yeah,
like,
so let's come up with this law, right? What does it mean if nobody enforces that? If people can go to restaurants and disobey the law, it's meaningless, right? So, and our right, my right to live here, I'm now in Israel, I'm now in Tel Aviv. My right to be here doesn't have to do with what some people in New York say or wherever they are, some people in London perhaps. It doesn't have to do with it. What has to do with rights is your actual labor, your actual efforts, your actual property rights. Israel was a malaria-infested, swampy wasteland before the pioneers came. That was, and if you look at the map, I wish I had sent you. There was a map of where there was malaria in Israel before, I think in the 30s, sometime in the 30s, and you see, and you can compare that with the partition plan, and you see that the proposed partition plan is where there is malaria, there's like desert, it's bad soil, and where the Arabs actually lived was not on that part. They lived on the area that wasn't malaria infested because it was dangerous, and there was good soil there to grow their olive trees and so on. So Israel got absolute nothing, dangerous place, and they made the most amazing Western, technologically advanced, superior in education, healthcare, anything is superior in virtually every way to any of our neighbors here. And instead of and provided huge opportunities for the local people, the local Arabs who lived here. They moved in huge numbers. There was a huge migration when the Jews came. The Jews came to Israel, and they made something out of nothing, essentially. And that brought the Palestinians. And if you read many of their family names, they are on like El Matzri is from Egypt. Alex, I think you know more. There are lots of these.
Tamimi obviously means that you're from Saudi Arabia. Al-Baghdadi, you're from Baghdad. Even Abbas, you are from Iraq. Al-Banna, Egypt. You know, we know where you come from enough.
Absolutely. And I have nothing to say against that. I'm not against them. I'm very happy that they come and they can have work and they have a better life. So I'm very pro-immigration. They won't say that. They won't say a single good thing about all the great things that the Jews have brought here, all the prosperity that we brought to this land. They won't say a thing. I'm very happy that we have workers that can help us here in the economy. Absolutely. And the Arabs are hardworking people. They are very high quality labor, and we absolutely should have them. And I have nothing to say against those who are not terrorists. Yeah.
Even just here in Jerusalem, I mean, there are no. I don't. I think I looked up the percentages one day. I think 30% of the pharmacists in Jerusalem are Jews. 70% are Arabs. You know, you have even Arabs who are dominating the certain fields. Pharmacy is definitely one of them. The medical field is also one of them.
Right.
Um,
Absolutely. And that is something that I celebrate. And a lot
mhm,
of countries celebrate. I want to see the Palestinian who celebrates that. I want to see the
mhm.
Palestinian who comes and says, "Oh, there's a Jewish settlement there. Great. That's an opportunity. That's an opportunity for trade, for business to bloom." Well, and the day that we'll have Palestinians who come out and say that, that is when we can have peace. That is the point, where they realize that the values of Western civilization are good values and they don't wish to annihilate them. That will be, and I wish if Omar was honest, was a person of integrity, he would have celebrated that. But you don't get virtually nobody is of integrity from their side, unfortunately.
Jonathan, I think many Palestinians are saying that without the second part. Oh, a Jewish settlement. Now there's an opportunity. But I think
Well,
it's taken in a much worse way.
yeah. Well, I
Just
also just want to. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead, Daniel.
I just quickly want to say something because I see it a lot. Someone in the chat is saying, "What does, or rather, where does Milakovsky come from?" And I see that's. I think it was. It used to be the last name, or is a last name of Benjamin Netanyahu. He has changed his last name. He was born in Israel, so I have no idea why people are even bringing that up. That's sort of like
We are
anti-Semitic.
pro-immigration. We didn't
Yeah,
say
and
that it was
that.
a bad thing. We said it's good to have people coming from Egypt to work here. It's a good thing. I have nothing against that.
Yeah, but that's sort of like anti-Semitic sentiment towards all Israelis that, yeah, it's just, it really shows the true colors of people. Similar to when people try to talk about Ayn Rand and they make sure to mention her name was Elisa Rosenbaum.
Yeah, well, even just to push back on his entire narrative here, right? In I think the first ever census that was done in Jerusalem, in the mid 1800s, there were 15,000 Jews and there were 8,000 Arabs. That was before the Zionist pioneers came and started to irrigate the land, started to like work the land, learned how to basically get rid of malaria. I think 100,000 of the pioneers died in the first decade of the first aliyah, as they call it, from malaria. He's completely and utterly engaging in all manner of gobbledygook. He even mentions this complete lie, which has been just repeated and repeated and repeated. The Israeli settlements constitute 3% of Judea and Samaria. 3%. 38% is Area A, so that's Palestinian land, right? Such as it is. And the rest is uninhabited. It's uninhabited state land, so this idea that we can't move, we can't breathe. I wish I will take you on a nice little drive through Samaria, and you can see it's basically uninhabited. You have 4 or 5 very, very big urban areas, and then basically it looks completely uninhabited. In any event. So I think Jonathan also mentioned the fact that there is this enormous amount of revisionist history that goes on, especially when kind of explaining the story of Israel. His story is just that, there were these people here for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, these Jews had this idea to come and they drove them out and yada, yada, yada. And which is just absolute nonsense. I mean, you open up the Palestinian phone book and you can see in the West, your surname may or may not kind of denote very much about you. But in the Middle East, your tribal name, your where your tribe is from, where your clan originated from, that is your name. So we know who they're immigrants who came because the Jews had brought prosperity to the land, and that's great. That's great. And many who kind of fled after the War of Independence, they fled back to their own countries, right? They just went. For example, the most popular name in Gaza is Al-Masri. Al-Masri means Egypt. They went back to Egypt. That's where they're from. They said, okay, we're going back. They wouldn't let them in. They were said, no, you can't come in. And then they created a refugee problem. And what does it mean to be a Palestinian? What does it mean in Omar's eyes? What does that term mean? Does it mean that you were living in Jerusalem in 1858 as a Jew? No, that's not a Palestinian. What about the Druze? Are the Druze Palestinian? They've been here a pretty long time. They were here, the kind of pre-Zionist pioneers. Are they Palestinian? No, they're not Palestinian. Are the Bedouins Palestinian? No, I don't think so, because most of the Bedouin tribes joined with the state of Israel to fight in the War of Independence. We even have to this day an entire Bedouin tracking unit that are masters of being able to understand every stone in the desert, and they do phenomenal search and rescue operations. But are they Palestinian? They're not Palestinian. So what it means to be a Palestinian means to be somebody who, in his eyes, somebody who violently opposes the state of Israel. That is what he thinks it means to be a Palestinian. Because if a Druze or a Bedouin or a Jew who was living here during the British Mandate, many of the Jews had Palestinian passports, but they're not Palestinian in his eyes, because it is a political identity to him. And so there's really not much you can say about Omar. He hits all the right buzzwords: occupation, genocide, blah, 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 blah. I mean, I almost feel like he's put his words through ChatGPT, and he's just blah, 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 genocide, occupation, UN, resolution, sanction, blah, blah, blah.
We have a super chat from Mary. Thank you so much. And a super chat from PC. Thank you so much. He says, there was no Palestine. I have Josephus' book, No Palestine was there. Let's quickly, we only have about 5 minutes, so let's quickly watch one more clip and then we'll wrap up.
Out of Gaza and then put Gaza under siege and made it a cage, and allowed Hamas to govern this cage internally. They can be the prison wardens of Palestinian prisoners. That's not meaningful governance. And then you can have a serious debate about how Hamas spent its money. You can say that maybe what they should have done is make this cage a little bit more pleasant for Palestinians to live in, and instead they chose to devote their resources into breaking out of that cage by investing in military infrastructure. I'm not a fan of Hamas. I don't support them. I oppose their rule. I don't think they're a particularly positive influence on Palestinian society. But at the end of the day, when you're talking about a captive population that Israel has just put in a cage and left to rot, it is natural that people are going to be drawn to more extremist and violent ideologies in order to break to that fundamental injustice.
But do you accept, though? But do you accept
that's really the reality?
You know, not a big fan of Hamas. I don't think they're really a positive influence on the Palestinians. Again, it's sort of like your mom talking to you about like a friend who like smokes or something. That's a good reference for the people 20 and under. It's sort of like the way he, you know, whenever it's Hamas, whenever it's Palestinians, whenever it's Hezbollah or Hassan Nasrallah doing something bad, well, it's geopolitically it's a geopolitical decision. You know, it's probably not good. They probably could have spent the money better, but you know, like a complete lack of seriousness when it comes to a group that has decided on October 7th to basically go into Israel, kill as many people as possible, and then take back hostages, among them even literal babies less than 1 year old, just so they have basically a bargaining chip when it comes to the sort of what's going to happen afterwards, and sort of saying, you know, not a big fan. Like, that's, yeah, I think it nicely summarizes Omar Baddar. Basically, that's all he can basically put himself towards saying about Hamas. Not a big fan. Jonathan?
It's really sad to see.
And actually, we only have like 4 minutes, so closing thoughts and where can people
Okay.
find you?
Mhm.
But you can comment a bit longer.
I just think it's very sad to see a person who's so deeply engaged in self-deception. It looks pathetic. It's kind of hard to be so harsh on him. I think he needs a psychiatrist. Now, there are many countries in the world that have shut borders with their neighbors. Many countries. I don't see him going after Egypt, the other country that has a border with Gaza. I don't see him criticizing them very much on enforcing the so-called open-air prison. Had he been an honest proponent of this position, he would have had exactly the same to say to Egypt. Egypt is supposedly collaborating with them. Why doesn't he have a single bad thing to say about them? They can go through Egypt. And by the way, back in the day, if they had given them enough of a bribe, the Egyptians would have let them out. So it's nonsensical to say that he's in open air prison. I agree that there should have never been an independent entity there. That's Israel's mistake. It is a mistake, and we have paid, and we continue to pay very badly for that. Absolutely. So there shouldn't have been such a state to begin with. Also in Judea and Samaria, absolutely, I agree that it is a bad thing that's going on. But yeah, it's ridiculous thing to say. It doesn't hold up once you realize that there is another country involved. Yeah. And where can our viewers find me? Our dear viewers may find me on Substack, philosophyIneeded.com. The link is in the description.
Alex, last thoughts, and where can people find you?
Yeah, speaking of which, maybe tonight, Jonathan and I can get in a car and drive across one of the many borders that we can drive across. Wait, we can't drive across any borders. We can, so maybe we're in an open air prison, right? Because the open air prison thing was a complete blood libel. It's really quite disgusting to see this lie being perpetuated. Having a naval blockade and checking what supplies go in and out of our territory that's governed by a terrorist organization is common sense. It's not an open air prison. They had more electricity in Gaza than they did in Lebanon. Higher standard of living, of course, than most of the unindustrialized Arab world. And just one last thought also on this, because we kind of been talking about the lie of the indigenous yada 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 yada. The Palestinians are extremely triggered and threatened by one thing the most, and that is archaeology, right? There's always these ridiculous conspiracies. The Jews are digging underneath the Temple Mount to try to, the Al-Aqsa Mosque to try and make it collapse. There's even instances of them excavating underneath Al-Aqsa Mosque and throwing away the archaeological evidence. Because they're worried that there's going to be some kind of Jewish artifact which is going to threaten their sense of self so much, right? Where can you find me? Obviously here on the Ayn Rand Center. I recommend, of course, everybody to go to Regavim. I recommend the IDSF of Betronissim. I recommend as well, as always, the Alma Center, and please also Kohelet for the think tank about free trade.
So you'll be able to find all of those in the description. And also we have a new article just came out on our Substack. I'm putting the link to that in the chat. It's by Richard and it's called Reason, Star of Cartoon. And I didn't get a chance to read it yet, but I just see Richard Matheson somewhere in the article, so it has to be good because I love that author. So as I've said, new Substack article, you can see it in the chat right now. Thank you guys for joining me today. Thank you everybody for watching, and we'll be back tomorrow with another episode of the Daily Objective and the reality show. Bye-bye.
Thank you.